You ready to get the best shape of your life?
All right.
Oh, goodness.
All right, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Train the Trainer podcast. Today, we're going to try to be really specific in giving you some tactical action items to take depending on what point in your personal training career you might be at. So we're going to get right into what does a personal trainer need to do in order to be ready to hit the ground running and making an impact and making a paycheck right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good topic. I wanted to make sure that we're kind of helping people get started, or even before you've gotten started. Obviously, we're trying to provide as much value to you guys as we can so we can kind of help grow the industry. So I think the first step is obviously just the thought or the idea hey, I might get into personal training. And then I think it's how can we formulate a game plan that's going to get us into the career quickly, but also get us ready when we do hit the career, if you will. Okay, so let's say that you're in high school or you're in another job and you're debating on, maybe trying personal training. What do you think would be some insightful information for somebody in that spot?
For sure. So for some, the scariest part about the personal training industry is that there's a very low barrier to entry where it doesn't require a 4-year degree. It doesn't require a big expensive education or licensure or anything like that. And that can almost make it seem more daunting because the path ahead is a little bit more murky, if you will. It's going to be 100% what you make it. Which for some, they love that. Okay, we have it written on the walls in our gym, but if it is to be, it's up to me, where you get to kind of determine your path ahead. So the things that are most important for someone considering looking at this career is, are you passionate about fitness enough to where, you're going to be in the gym all day, every day, still getting in your own workouts.
Mm-hmm.
You're not concerned about being bored with taking people through the same workouts. You're excited about interacting and adding value to people. Typically, those that have the fastest start don't typically struggle with external motivation. They have a lot of internal motivation themselves, where they're good about managing their time. They're typically a little bit more on the competitive side too,
mm-hmm.
in my experience. So just a couple of thoughts coming in, do you need a lot of structure? Do you need someone holding your hand and telling you what you need to do through the whole day? Do you have a little bit more of an entrepreneurial spirit and you love being in the gym?
Mm-hmm.
Those people typically succeed the fastest, although that's not necessary. It's just, those are the people that typically pick up the tasks the easiest. I know we're going to get into that a lot today as far as what those tasks and action items are to get busy out of the gate.
Yeah. And I think when you're asking yourself these questions, it's also a great time to be researching. What gym do you want to work at? Some people are, in a place where they're I don't want any level of authority over me. I want complete control of my business. They're super entrepreneurial. And those might be people that lean more towards the studio side of things. Personally, I think the best route for everybody would be to find a gym, because it's going to give you the opportunity to learn from other people and other trainers. I think that's a better starting point, if you will, is starting at a gym. But you're also going to want to do your research when you look at gyms. I know when I started deciding that I was going to do training, I planned on doing it while I was in college. I had looked at 3 of the gyms in my city. One of them required me to get an additional certification through their specific certification that they offer. I wasn't really interested in doing that. Another gym required me to do functional training, and essentially what that was the head trainer wrote workout plans, and you had to deliver all of those workout plans to your clients. You had no say-so really as to what you did. And then Genesis, where I'm at now, allowed me to formulate my own programs for all my clientele. I manage essentially my own schedule completely, and I feel the income potential was a little bit better. So those are all things that you should be taking into account. It's okay, do I want to have a boss that's really hands-on, or do I want to have a lot more freedom? Do I want to build a program my clients myself and actually take that responsibility? Or do I need someone to tell me literally exactly what to do? And granted, even our gym, if a trainer came to one of us and was hey, I don't even know what to do, can you just write me a workout? We would both be able to do that. But it's definitely something to consider when you're deciding where you're going to go.
Yep. And I know this is typically a mindset shift that happens for a trainer several months in, but oftentimes discourages trainers in their first several months, where they try to create separation around their income and I want to help people, right? everybody that enters into this personal training industry, or at least in my mind, has some of that. Like, I want to add value to other people. I want to help people. But oftentimes we aggrandize those opportunities where, like, if I'm making less and I'm in a smaller club, I'm more altruistic. Like, I care more about helping other people if the income potential is lower. If I'm going in and a company's talking about, like, we want our trainers doing well professionally, we want them making great income because we see that as commensurate with the value they're delivering our member base. It's amazing in my experience how many trainers take themselves out of the industry because they don't even want to explore that option, right? If there's an opportunity for me to be successful, then I'm gonna avoid it.
And you can literally see it, like, just in my own city and my own example that I was giving is, like, the two other gyms that I looked at that had lower earning potential gave me what I felt like was a lower level of impact for my clientele. Because, I mean, one of them literally was telling me I had to do a specific type of training regardless of what the client asked for, regardless of what I felt was the best for the client. It was, no, you're going to do this. And it's like, the more responsibility you're willing to bear, it seems like the more you're going to receive from your gym that you decide. But also at the same time, like, my level of help, if you will, that I'm providing, or my level of value is so much higher at a company that allows me to receive a higher level of value as well.
For sure. I mean, that'd be a question I'd be asking as someone new coming into the industry is, what is your average trainer producing, earning? What's their average client load look like? You want to be around those that are successful in this industry, so you have someone to mirror and you have someone to
someone
follow.
to coach you and teach you. I would never want to, like, looking back, I'm incredibly thankful because I came from a different city an hour north of where we're at in Wichita, and another guy at a Genesis told me to come to the club that I did so that I could follow Andy. Without that, I don't know where I would have been. So, you're definitely going to want to look for leaders in the gym that you're going to look at, or wherever you're going to work. You're going to want to find trainers that have a high knowledge base, have been in the industry for a while, and know how to be successful, because they're going to be able to teach you directly.
Yep. And if they were able to do it, then you can too. So yeah, I mean, make sure to do your due diligence and your research ahead of time. But really, I mean, the hardest thing once you get started is going to be, okay, now I have a open schedule in front of me that I need to go build and get busy quick. Because in most situations, the pay for a personal trainer that is not actively delivering value to paying clients is going to be very low, right? There might be some, like, insurance in place, whether it be like an hourly minimum, or some kind of draw, or some kind of base pay for a trainer that's starting out, but that isn't going to be there forever. So
some clubs offer, like, floor hours forever where you can clean equipment, but I imagine most of us watching this podcast didn't get in the industry to clean weight equipment.
Not to make $7 an hour.
No. Before we get, like, into, like, the week one, if you will, so week one as a trainer, and I know we've said this on previous podcasts, but it's worth addressing for anybody new coming in that's watching this podcast for the first time. We do not believe that certifications are going to be your number one priority when you start the industry. I'm not saying you don't need one. Obviously, I think you should get one. Most gyms require you to have a certification. However, we don't believe that that's, like, a leading indicator, not only for success for yourself, but also for success for your clients. Fair?
Not at all. Because if you're both starting out in a gym, let's say a trainer that started at 18 years old right out of high school, and someone coming in with a master's degree and 5 specialty certifications, if you're both on the gym floor, I mean, cleaning up weights and trying to talk to members, you're both making the same.
Yeah, you're both doing the exact same thing.
Right.
And a lot of the times what we'll see is people that have, somebody that came into the industry at 18 and has worked for the past 4 years versus somebody coming from school for the past 4 years. The person that's been in the industry has significantly and insurmountable, like, more knowledge. Yep. They're just way ahead. So
they have more contact
get into
hours.
The industry. That's where you're going to get educated. Your certification should be something that's relatively inexpensive and allows you to just get your foot in the door at whatever gym you're going to work at.
Yeah, and even if you're in school, one of the great things about personal training is you can literally build an entire schedule around school time. Yeah. Right. So I mean, I've seen incredibly successful personal trainers still managing a full-time school load. And we have individuals doing 40 hours a week of personal training
at our gym alone while doing full-time college.
Making $70,000, $80,000 a year plus. And the only reason why they're not making more with the same schedule is just because they're new. Yeah. Right? They're not charging the higher training fees yet. They're not necessarily earning quite as a high commission rate yet. But all those things over time, I mean, you can still pursue more formal education if that's something that you feel like would really benefit you, while you're still learning. Feet on the ground, if you will.
Yeah. So I tell this to clients, but I'm going to tell this to trainers too. I mean, the quickest way to adjust to the temperature of a pool is to just jump in. So like your first step, if you're thinking about becoming a trainer, is literally just get your foot in the door and start and see what happens. So once your foot is in the door, now what's our next step?
For sure. So understanding the business of personal training, how it works. This is essentially like a funnel. We're always concerned about the amount of clients that we're working with, either if we're looking at that as an impact goal or an income goal. Again, understanding that that's commensurate, right? The more your paycheck grows, it's because you've helped more people, and the more people you help, the more your income should grow. So from that funnel, if we're looking at clients, before you have a client, you need to have trials, you need to have consultations, you need to have assessments, you need to have offerings where you're inviting potential prospective clients onto your client roster. Before you can even get somebody to come in for a consultation, they just have to be someone that you've spoken with, whether it's a new member list of the club that you're inviting to come in for a free workout with you, a free consultation, whether they're out on the street. You mentioned that couple that you spoke with at dinner last night.
I got turned down, by the way.
But you shot your shot.
Yes, I did.
Regardless of where those contacts come from, so the more inflow you have of prospective clients, the more opportunities you're going to have for consultations and invitations, and then the more clients you'll end up receiving as well.
Yeah.
Regardless of those skill percentages, where trainers get that wrong is they're thinking about, okay, I'll make 6 figures if I have 30 clients, let's say, on my roster, right? Where you're helping 30 people and you're going to be able to earn 100,000. The kicker of that is you have to go offer your help and your service to 300 people in order to get 30 clients. And it's purely a volume game. And oftentimes trainers drag their feet and kind of get lost in the fact that I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing. And even if I get somebody, I'm not sure 100% what I'm going to do with them. And they kind of sabotage themselves because they never put in enough work to get the end result.
Yeah. I mean, the visualization of that funnel is massive because, it's true. You're going wide at this point. You're not going deep. You're not looking for specific types of clientele. You're not looking for referrals because you don't have a client to give you a referral. You're not looking for like a lay down offer, if you will. You're just looking for everybody. Working with a lot of new trainers in this past couple of months and even working with one the other day, it's like you said, where it's like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do when I'm training somebody. And it's like, we'll train more people and I bet you'll figure it out. As much as I've learned from asking questions from other trainers, I have learned significantly more, especially even now through trial and error with current clientele. And it's funny, some of my clients know this. They're like, I feel like I'm your guinea pig right now. And I'm like, yeah, I've never done this before. We'll see what happens, right? And that's okay sometimes because you have a little bit of a background knowledge enough to like where you can do something safely and you can continue to educate yourself directly by working with a client, which to me is the only way to like truly learn something is like when you're applying it. And then that's going to grow your knowledge base more too. So, it's purely a numbers game, like we said in the beginning.
For sure. I think of like sports analogies often. You ever seen the movie Hoosiers? When, Jimmy Chitwood's out.
My dad's
shooting
favorite
free throws.
movie.
Yes, I knew that you had. So when you're learning to shoot a basketball, right? I think a lot of trainers would get caught up where like I've shot 3 times and I missed all 3. Like I'm terrible at this. I need to quit basketball, right? When that's not really the problem. The problem is that they haven't established any muscle memory, right? Yeah, maybe their hands are in the wrong position, etc. Right? But if they just put in more volume, they'd end up getting better. It's funny, we have a woman at our gym.
No, we can't.
100% we're telling this story where she shoots the basketball backwards over her head because she was concerned that she didn't quite have the strength to shoot it forward. So she shot it over her head backwards for probably, what's it been?
It's almost been a year now. It's got to be 6 months now.
Right. And she would never, ever make a basket. And this ball would end up going everywhere. It would
hit a bunch of
treadmills.
She's still doing it to this day, literally every single day in our gym.
For hours. The thing is now, it's not uncommon for her to make like 5 in a row, right? So regardless of the task, whether it's a value add, right,
Yeah.
or if it's actually something that's important to master, right? If you do it with enough volume, you're going to get better at it over time. So yeah, when we're like reverse engineering the activity goals for our trainers, right? We assume that they'll convert a new client at 25%, let's say. Okay. So we figure out how many contacts and how many appointments they need per day. In all reality, right, when they first start, it might be 10%, right? But the thing is, they're never going to get to 25% unless they go put in enough legwork and put in enough volume of work to get good at it. Okay. It's the same thing with, let's say, teaching a client to squat, right? There's only so many cues and like technical like fixes that we could give to somebody to make them squat perfectly on day one. It just won't happen, right? It's going to take 10,000 squat attempts for them to even get good.
Yeah, this is like a perfect quote. Alex Hermosi tweeted this out the other day, and I screenshotted it because I loved it so much. But it kind of ties into what we're talking about. So in your first week, I mean, this kind of sums it up. You don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by having a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. Outwork your self-doubt. And so essentially what we're saying is like, you might not think you're good at this yet, and you're not going to become good at this by just like he says, looking in the mirror and like telling yourself that you're good. You get really good by working so hard and doing such an insurmountable amount of contacts and reach outs and engagement. And you just constantly are networking. That's how you actually get good at this. Okay. Because it gives you that proof, because when you're doing those numbers and you're actually, making all those contacts every day at such a high volume, okay, you're going to start to actually have clientele now. Well, even if it's 5 or 6 or 7 clients, once you have them, it gives you the confidence to believe like, oh, okay, I'm actually really good at this. I can make a few more contacts.
It will prove back to you that you actually care about people too.
Yeah.
You're not just thinking about it for the income. Although an exercise that we'll do is we'll add the dollar amount as far as what that value would be to you back to those contacts. And I think we might have spoken about this before in a previous podcast.
Yeah, we've done that.
If your 30 clients will account for $100,000 in income, right? That means the 300 contacts that it took to get there, that means every contact was worth $1,000. I do that math right, or is it $100?
333.
$333, right? So as a brand new trainer, if you believed that every person that you talked to was worth $333, like in your wallet, right? How many more people would you talk to? And if the answer is more than what you're doing currently, then the income is important to you.
Yeah.
Right. And it is simply a belief issue, right? If we can convince ourselves, like if we could all hypnotize ourselves that it's $333 in value for every person that we talk to, we'd all go talk to more people. And again, the only limit on that would be our imagination. We wouldn't be asking ourselves, okay, what's the least amount of contacts I need every day in order to like move the needle on my paycheck or have my boss not yell at me or what have you. But you'd be asking about, okay, what's the most amount of contacts I could do?
How much am I willing to bear, not versus what do I have to do? I think that's the difference.
For sure. I had a trainer in 45 days, got to the point where they were already pacing 6 figures in income. This was when I was back out on the East Coast. Now, this individual would drive me crazy because he wouldn't even remember the person's name half the time that he was contacting. I'd ask him like, "Oh, who were you just working with?" I don't know, but I just put him through a workout. And what he did is he would show up at the gym at his schedule that he wanted to end up working. He would show up at like 5 or 6 a.m. He'd be done at 5. He would go coach track and field at a college after that. But he would just literally be engaging people from the time he came in to the time he left. And he would always typically go after the people that are already in shape because he wanted to be seen as the trainer that trained people that was in shape. And I kid you not, in 45 days, he had like a waiting list of clients. He would literally just like when someone came up and was like, "Man, I want to work with you," he would just open up his scheduler, which was packed, and be like, "Okay, which of these time slots do you want?" It wasn't even talking about price. It was just like, "Okay, this is literally the only opportunities I have to help you. Which of these do you want? Because they'll be booked by the end of today."
Yeah,
it was just purely a volume game.
Yeah, so that kind of sums up your week 1, or maybe even a little bit into your month 1, where like you're just pushing the volume game as much as possible. Obviously, you're going to do a little bit of shadowing, I imagine, at this point, and some continued education. But again, most of your education is purely going to come from like actually getting hands-on with people.
Invite people to work out with you.
Yeah, you'll learn a lot more that way. Yep. Okay. So moving on from like entry point, focusing on engagement on month 1. Let's say that you've gotten to the point where maybe you have 10 to 15 clients at this point, right? So you're kind of like at that halfway point, if you will, toward like our typical ideal we usually say is right around 30. Okay, what's like the next step around 10 or 15? Because I feel like there's usually some hesitation around there.
Yeah, that's when a a lot of trainers get struggled into like that overwhelm trap. Okay, now I have some clients that I need to make sure I'm taking care of. So I'm going to either take my foot off the gas as far as on my new business acquisition where I'm still reaching out to people, and I'm going to start getting lost into like the programming trap where I need to give all of my 15 clients the most advanced programming of all time. When in reality, right, you've been training these people for a couple weeks, a month or so now, right? When prior to working with you, they probably weren't exercising for decades. Their level of programming needs does not need to be all that advanced, right? It's simply a matter of keeping them coming into the gym to where they don't hit that like plateau point where they lose motivation, they get comfortable, they fall off, etc. So I think that's crucially important when you're like a month in. You should not be throttling back your new business acquisition where you're trying to go out and engage. You're trying to do both of those things. So it might actually require a little bit more, although you do have a little bit more peace of mind of knowing your paycheck.
So a couple like touch points, I feel like. So like as people are falling into the programming trap, I legitimately believe that to a degree, reaching out to your clientele during the time where you're writing their program would probably be more useful for your client than the actual program itself.
100%.
Like the continued engagement with your client, which is going to lead to a high level of like retention because they're going to think that you care even more. And then they're going to work out more on their own because you're reaching out to them. That's going to yield them a much higher benefit than any sort of complex program can at this point. Okay. Because if you're only at month, 4 at this point in your training career and you have 10 to 15 clients, that means that the longest someone's been working with you is 4 months. 4 months, you don't need a complex program yet. You still are learning the basics, right? I mean, the average client's going to train for, if they really want to know everything, it's going to be years upon years of training. And then the other thing that I think happens at this 10 to 15 client mark, and I hate to say it, but your bills are paid typically. And I see that a lot where I feel like once a trainer's like, okay, I'm paying my bills each month, I'm done. And it's like, well, when you started, you told me you wanted to help as many people as you could. What do you mean you're done? Like, we get to this point where it's like, okay, my bills are paid now. I'm not running from any fear behind me. So now I'm settling, right? Yeah. And it's kind of hard because you either have to create a new fear to run from, or you have to start running back towards that original pleasure that you claimed in the first place, where it's like my goal or my purpose is to, help as many people as possible. And people find it harder, I think, to run towards helping people. And it's a lot easier to run away from the idea that you might not pay your bills. Does that make sense?
For sure. It becomes more of a, like I'd be scared if I didn't really reach or pursue my potential, which is really easy to rationalize away, for sure. Just because I don't want to forget, I think that on the programming side, something that we work with new trainers on, as far as like how we can like not get lost in that, because a lot of trainers, again, they might not even invite as many clients onto their roster as they could because they're scared of what am I going to do with them once I got them. So from a program design standpoint, something that's always helped me with helping trainers with like new clientele, for someone's first 3 months, if they're working with you more than 2 days a week, those days where they're coming in on their own are simply cardio. So then the only thing that you have to do when they're not with you is to follow up and make sure they showed up for their cardio. Very easy. If they're coming with you 1 day a week, that second day a week is going to be a mirror of that session that they had with you or a machine circuit. And then as far as programming the sessions that you have with somebody, I think this is something that's just not necessary that a lot of people get lost in the weeds on. But you know this for me, where I rarely program out a session with somebody ahead of time. Now, granted, I've done tens of thousands of sessions in my career where that's not necessary. But what I'll have my trainers work through is you're going to go through make sure that you have at least 3 sets on every major movement pattern with somebody. You're going to go through at least 3 sets of horizontal push, horizontal pull, vertical push, vertical pull, something unilateral, lower body push, lower body pull, and then abs. And if you do that with everybody, right? 2-3 days a week, you're checking all the boxes in a way where you're going to deliver a great service. You can just focus on the rapport and giving a great experience, and then not get lost in the weeds, right? All the more advanced stuff can come down the road. I forget who I was telling. A client was asking me something last week about like a more advanced training principle, and I was able to answer it. And they're like, how much of like your training knowledge do you need to use like when you're training people on a regular basis? I'm like, I have no idea, but a very small percentage.
Yeah.
It's just not important. What's important is delivering a great experience where they want to show up and come back, and then the volume of activity to make sure you have enough people on your roster.
Yeah. I mean, personally, myself, like at this like 3 to 6 month mark, I remember I was sitting down. I think it took me 2 weeks to create my programming format. It took me two entire weeks to create a spreadsheet that I could like replicate and that was repeatable for a program. It's funny now because looking back, like I was so obsessed over that, and I was like, "That's exactly what needs to get done. Exactly what needs to get done." But now that I'm really later into my training career and I have a busy schedule, I've actually completely simplified all of my programming. And so, like as you get into this field a little bit longer, you realize that like the complex programs help people less, truthfully, because they're, I mean, intimidating. They don't understand them, and so like what I've done now is like it's simple stuff where it's like, here, this is going to be your 2 workouts that you're going to do on your own. I'm going to take you through these on Monday and I'm going to take you through them on Friday, and you're just going to keep repeating these over and over for like the next 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. And because then they know how to do it, they're more likely to do it. I don't get to do the fun stuff, whatever, at least on the program. But I told them like, hey, when you come in with me, we're going to like level up above this and I'm going to show you how to do a bunch of cool stuff. But I really just want you to follow this, I mean, boring-esque program, if you will, every time you're alone, because I don't need you not understanding what we're doing.
For sure. 100% agree. I want to go back because I know that was kind of a side tangent, and I apologize because I think you brought up something that was really important. When trainers no longer have to worry about covering their bills, that's where you end up seeing them kind of like putter out, if you will.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is, yes, like you may not be running from something, but I think that's an even scarier position. Is motivation is gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not in a position where you can inspire your clients with motivation that you have for yourself, I think that's a dangerous place. Number 2, I think that's where people lose fulfillment in what they're doing because they're not growing, so they end up end up dying. They're not fulfilling their potential, so they feel understimulated. Like, I need to go look where the grass is greener somewhere else. That's where you'll see a lot of trainers, I mean, either pursue other industries. You never see like a top performing personal trainer do that. It's always like in like that 15 to 20
middle range.
Pursuing other industries, going back to school. Again, like that must be what I'm missing. It can't be that it's on me. It must be that I'm missing some education. Or like going off on their own where they feel like if they have their name on the building, that somehow that is going to be a better opportunity for them from a personal training standpoint. Like if I can get 100% of what my clients are paying, then I'll be in a better spot. When in reality, I mean, we know that to be true, that, I mean, the average small gym personal trainer is making significantly less because of all the other headaches and whatnot that comes along with it.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to a guy today that I was trying to bring onto our team /hire. And he initially was like, yeah, if I thought about it, but if I ever did it, like I'd want to do it on my own, you know? And I was like, no, I don't know. And he was like, what? And that's what I was explaining to him. I was like, dude, the amount of income that you have is so much lower. The amount of impact that you have is so much lower. It's not worthwhile. I mean, it's super difficult to do. So I'm a big fan of big gyms. So I agree with you on that. I think the other unfortunate part around like the bills being paid part around clients 10 to 15 is that's a very short-term mindset. Just like as a person in general, no matter what career you're in, I think it's scary to think that like just because you're getting by, if you will, that you would be done trying to raise your income. I mean, then you have to start thinking like, how am I going to retire? If you're a personal trainer, a lot of people don't necessarily think they can do this career till they're 65. I don't believe that, but some people do. And so if you believe that, then you need to have a game plan moving forward for what you're going to do when you're 55 and supposedly can't train people anymore. So I think like paying your bills, that's awesome. That's phenomenal. I know that that's something that like has to get done. But I mean, remember why you got in the industry. If you're actually passionate about helping people, and like you're constantly reminding yourself about that's what this is about. It's not about the money. I think you'll continue to pursue more, and then your income will surpass your bills by a significant margin.
Yeah, I think it's never a bad thing to inspire yourself by pushing towards your potential and doing what you always thought that you could, or maybe potentially didn't think that you could. I think that's really important. And it's weird for trainers as they're coming up. So this is kind of where I want to make sure I hit this home, if you will. But like every 6 months for those trainers that aren't like really trying to grow and pursue that potential, they're always in that like grass must be greener mode, if you will. It's like every 6 months, you have to like reel them back in, which is just like a client too that's not making progress. right? And they might even rationalize to you they don't really care about that much progress anymore. They're just working out with you because to make sure they work out and they like you. But every 6 months, they start questioning, and it's a result of them not, I mean, doing the best that they can and trying to move that needle forward.
Yeah. So if you're at this, 6-month mark or whatever, and you have these 10 to 15 clients, just to like reiterate and recap, we still believe that the primary focus should be continued outreach and pursuing, helping more people. I think it's very powerful if you can self-author yourself and realize like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit more content lately. I'm not making as many contacts. And if you're, tracking all your contacts along the way, you'll know that you're making less. One of the best things you can do, and if you're privileged enough to work in an industry that has other trainers that are above you, is you go talk to them. I know that those were conversations you and I had every time my schedule felt busy. I was like, Andy, I can't take any more clients. And I had like 15, and he's like, dude, you're crazy. You can take way more. I'm up to 42 right now, I think is what I have actively.
42 clients, yeah.
42 clients, but at 25, I told them I couldn't take more. 30, I told them I couldn't take more. 35, I was like, I can't take more. And I've just continued to grow that, but it's because I have the willingness to have the conversation, if you will. So you can't be afraid to go talk to somebody else about how you're feeling. I think that's a great thing. And so if you're at that month mark or 6-month mark and you're feeling content, if you will, go talk to somebody that's a little bit further ahead of you in the industry and see if you can kind of reignite the fire and remotivate yourself back towards the main focus, which is continued engagement.
For sure. And down the road, I think there is definitely a place where like we can focus on doing more from a qualitative standpoint. Like how do I deliver a higher quality service, or how can I like increase the value that I'm adding to, myself, my people I interact with, my organization, etc. But for most people, I think there's kind of a stigma against this. Most people just need to do more, like quantitatively more. From a session service perspective, that's going to be one of the biggest things that increase your quality of service, is just more hands on deck. Like you said, you have such an advantage over kids that are coming out of school with degrees but have never trained anybody, right? Where you've 10,000 plus hours now with somebody. That's such an advantage that a lot of people don't have. So yeah, I think it's very important to focus mostly just on doing quantitatively more, and in turn that's gonna
and you can apply that in session too, where it's like as simple as just doing, okay, we're gonna get more sets this workout than we did last time. Like if you're trying to grow your client or whatever at that point, and let's say your client's been with you for 6 months, like some of the first ones that you signed up, it's kind of that same thing. That's like, just try to attempt to do more sets, right? It's as simple as progressive overload, which hopefully everyone listening to this knows kind of what that is. Where like, again, the answer is to the equation is primarily doing more. It's more activity right now. We're not, that's kind of where we're at. Now, once we're at like the 1 year mark, right? Let's say that we're at, 25, maybe even into that 30 client range. Maybe this is at 2 years when somebody gets there.
40, 50.
40, 50 clients. Okay. But we get to 30 clients, right? We kind of have that, like, we made it, if you will. You probably have 40 hours of training at this point if you have 30 clients. What's the next step from there?
At that point, you could potentially shift to qualitative, like how am I going to deliver more value to these individuals? Or I think it's really valuable for a trainer as they move forward to continue trying to be a leader in the field, to continue, not only to try to train themselves well, train their clients well, and I don't just mean physically, but contribute back to the next generation, right? Where that's the next evolution for a trainer, is to where they're delivering more value and more contribution to a team of individuals, right?
Yeah. I think that I know you and I view it this way, but I think some trainers might not, where like we view personal training in general as like a team sport, where it's like everybody that has a PT shirt on, whether you're wearing purple with us at Genesis or whether you're at a different company, like we are a team against the same thing, which I'm not saying is like general like obesity, but just general like lack of health. And so if we're a team against that, and like our goal and our mission and our reason for getting in the industry is like we want to fight against what we currently have going on in the country, passing that off to the next person and giving them information when you can't take anymore or you legitimately are full of clients, that is, I think, the natural next step for us.
100%. Yeah, we're not going to be able to, no one person is going to change the entire health trajectory of their community on their own. We're not going to be able to do it ourselves. So it takes an army of people in order to move the needle. So yeah, at the point, let's say, where your schedule really is full, and not just because you've compromised it and tell yourself that it's full, but let's say it's like actually full. You're putting in a top performer schedule, which is probably in excess of 40 hours a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
In all reality, right? The top 1% of a field, or even the top 10% of the field, right? The average six-figure earner, I believe, works a 55 or 60-hour work week. As a personal trainer, obviously, it doesn't require that, but I think those are the individuals that are typically moving the needle forward the most and providing the most amount of impact, not just on their clients, but in an organization. So let's say you're at that place. That next step is, who can you take with you? Like, who else can you bring along on the ride that can deliver more value to even more people? That's ultimately what it's all about. In my mind, like a moral and ethical stance, like if you're truly about in this industry to make an impact. And then, of course, it comes back to you in income, too.
Yeah, and I think we have it written up on our whiteboard over next to us where, once you hit that point at the 1 to 2 or 3 year mark, you either become a tenured vet or you become an industry leader, right? We can talk about just the differences in those, right? So to me, a veteran of the industry versus a leader in the industry is probably somebody that's primarily focused on their income. So their main priority is like, I'm going to keep as many clients as I can that I have. And then they're going to network specific certain clientele. They can afford like a higher dollar amount possibly. And they have like a backlist of clients maybe that they kind of keep for themselves that are literally just not even working out at all. And then they're like, well, if I ever lose a client, I'll call my list of people I have in my back pocket. Mm-hmm. To me, that's like, it's kind of disgusting to me to think that way. Like, I've never had somebody just like, oh, I'll call this person when I lose a client. It's like, if I have somebody, then I don't have a spot for them. You're going to go work with this other trainer. If you love them, cool, you're going to stay with them. But if, I get an opening and I text you and I'm like, hey, I have an opening and you really want to come work with me, cool, now you can come work with me. I think that's kind of the difference, again, where we talk about like, okay, well, what is our focus? Is it income versus influence? And if we're focusing on influence and helping other people, we don't like stockpile people that are just not exercising.
For sure. And in turn, it always comes back to your income too. So
yeah, you're going to make more. And most gyms, and I know ours does, are going to reward you for allocating those clients towards somebody else. But we have veterans that have that same scarcity-based mindset where they're not willing to share clientele. If they go out of town for a week, they're not going to have another trainer cover their clients. They're like, no, I'm not going to let anybody train my people. I want them there when I come back. It's an extremely selfish attitude that doesn't grow the industry at all.
No, and that I know we talked about it before already, but I'm going to hit on it again. Like that separation that people create in their mind of like, if I look at earning more money in this industry, right, then I'm not going to help as many people, when it's not true. Or like on the other end, right, if I help more people, right, I'm not expecting that to change my income necessarily, when in reality, right, they're 100% linked.
Commensurate. Because our industry leaders, at least like in our purview that we see, the people that are leading are making significantly more than just like a tenured vet that is doing that stockpile-esque mentality.
Right. And to that point, right, that you've used the word tenured vet, right? But let's say that individual that's really just, protecting a minimum income amount, and they've gotten comfortable, and that's why they're not bringing people in. They're also typically the ones that will only do any extra activities if they're getting paid for it, right? So they're really not about helping those individuals at all.
No.
Right? They're just trying to afford as comfortable of a lifestyle as possible, which unfortunately, and by comfort, what I mean is not challenged. Mm-hmm. They could be far better off financially, so I guess it could be more comfortable in that regard if they were to go all in, but it's not a win-win situation.
No, you don't see continued education either on that same point. Like,
no,
somebody that's operating from that scarcity mindset that's been in the industry for a long time, you don't see them continuing their own education. So if you watch them 10 years later, it's like, what did this dude like read a bunch of 10-year-old like studies or something? Like he trains like it's the 80s still. Versus somebody that's continuously growing and moving the needle forward. They're going to continue their education. They're always going to be with everything. Any new information coming into the field, they're going to have it and they're going to be able to apply it. And I think there's like a insurmountable difference between those two at this point.
For sure. And just to touch on maybe any of you individuals that might be in like a head trainer or a fitness manager role, like you need to be really mindful and watchful of those individuals on your team that tell you that everything's okay, right? my schedule's as busy as I want it to be. I'm just kind of coasting. I want to focus on my work life balance. I want to focus on all these other things other than building, supporting, or adding more value to my business. Right? Those individuals, I mean, I've seen it time and time again. I've been fortunate where we haven't experienced a lot of this, but I've experienced it many other places where those are the individuals that will come up to you out of the blue and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm opening my own gym down the street, and I'm taking all my clients with me."
Yeah, or they're looking for another job. I mean, I mean,
I'm going to go back to school or what have you.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it on the last study with I was talking about the dopamine releases in association with the mouse, and like as the maze got harder, despite the reward not changing, the mouse received more dopamine on the harder maze. I think that's like a true tell to like just human nature in general, where it's like the consistent pursuit of growth, if you will, is what gives you that fulfillment. And it's like the moment you stop doing that, you become desensitized. And so even though the reward's the same, you're getting the same paycheck over and over and over again, it stops feeling so good. And then the business doesn't feel so good. And the gym you work at sucks now. And some of your clients complain too much. And it's like, well, now what are you? You're somebody who's detracting from the industry rather than providing for it. And you lose the love of the game, if you will, for yourself, which I mean is super sad because this is literally potentially what you've been doing for the last 5 to 10 years at this point.
Yeah, 100%. So what you can do a little bit more specifically around action items. So, I mean, qualitatively, how can you add value, right? If you've been charging the same amount for the last year or 2 years, right, that's a mistake because it represents that you haven't gotten any better. Mm-hmm. So there should be a constant look to improve your services or potentially an add-on service. So that's something that you can do as an individual in that role. Second, of course, would be to give back to those around you, whether it's on a team of personal trainers as like a mentor type role, not necessarily in like a positional hierarchy, but just someone that's giving back to their team and those around them because they represent you too. They affect your property value, if you will. Potentially like leading like educational meetings or development meetings. Producing for your team. If that's a skill set that you have, like onboarding new clientele, that's an area that typically new trainers struggle in. If you're really good at that as someone that's been in the industry for a while, most places will compensate you to acquire new business to the organization. Right. Or you could even approach whoever your direct report is and give them that as an option. Right. So if you're bringing in new business in an SNS type scenario where you're selling that service but not necessarily servicing it, that you receive some type of compensation for that up front, and then you grow, again, the overall program without growing your own client roster, if you will. So a couple examples as far as how you can still always be looking at growing without just adding clients to your client roster.
I think those are great. I'm going to try not to get too into specifics here because I don't want to give away too much information, if you will. But I just like as a touch point, one of the trainers that is more on the veteran side of things and maybe isn't as excited about their job, the happiest I ever see them is when we have a new trainer shadow them, which I think just kind of touches to what we're talking about, where when this trainer is providing value to this new trainer and showing them the ropes, if you will, that's the best mood that I see them in. I mean, every time that I'm in the club. So that's really cool to see that value add for them and where they feel like they're contributing more. So they suddenly feel better. I hope that eventually those 2 points connect for them and they realize that, and then that will teach them to pursue more. But it is kind of a cool note to see, if you will. Yeah. And then also on the, upgrading your prices. This is one thing for me that helped me so much become a better trainer was just looking at price point. As I got a little bit busier and Andy would be like, hey, I think, it's time. Like, let's bump your prices up. You're getting pretty busy again. I would feel like, to a degree, insecure, where I was like, man, I don't feel like I'm good enough to bump my prices yet. And so how do I overcome that insecurity? I would go insane about my continued education where it was like, you know what, I need to learn more about this, and this as quickly as possible because I'm asking for a new charge right now. And so I need to be able to provide so much more value to account for that. And every single time I've bumped my price point up, it's been that same thing where it's like, okay, I need to be even better as a trainer. And so like me forcing myself to bump my price point forced me to level up my own quality as well. So I think that'd be a great tool for somebody that's, even if you're at your 3-month mark and you only have 15 clients and you're feeling a little bit less motivated, bump that price point up a little bit, and I promise you that fire comes right back real quick.
For sure. So this is something that gets asked of me all the time, but I know that you've gone through it a little bit. I mean, you've gone through it here recently where it's been a while since I've had any, let's say, price point adjustment. So how do you go about approaching that conversation? So let's say you have a trainer that is open to increasing their prices, right? They're not being reluctant to it. They're not essentially working themselves out the door, but they're open to it and continue to build to grow their business. How do you approach that conversation? What's kind of your methodology?
Yeah, so it's kind of a tough one, and you kind of have to meet people where they're at. I think the way you approach that conversation with a trainer on like they're bumping their price point kind of differs from person to person. I think comparison is the thief of joy, but personally for me, like looking at other trainers and thinking like I think I'm a better trainer than them, and knowing that they charge more than me, that kind of always bothered me a little bit. So it would kind of motivate me more, where it's like, you know what, I think I should bump my price point because I think I'm better than him, and that's me being competitive. However, in my experience, like with other trainers, talking about, I mean, if your schedule is truly full, right? The only next like logical step is to bump your price point, because how else are you going to continue to grow your business? And then telling them like, you know, here's some of the benefits. Like when you bump your price point, your client feels like this is more serious, right? That's one of the big things. So your client's going to take the program more serious. They're going to come work out on their own more often. They're paying a higher dollar. They're going to look for more value, and they're actually going to be the ones who create it, because they're going to come in and work out more on their own and do more on their own as well. I feel like the clients that I've had pay more have always worked out harder than the clients that I had when I first started and paid significantly less. So telling new trainers about that has been a big thing, where they feel a little bit more comfortable with the price point bump. And then also opening the door to them about, you know, SNSing or sold not servicing, where it's like, you know what, if somebody can't afford that higher price point, that's fine. We have a bunch of new trainers, and I mean, keep new trainers around so that you can allocate those clients that want that cheaper price point to those newer trainers.
For sure. So most of what you just told me is a shift in your own belief is what helped you the most, right? As you thought about it differently yourself, you were far more open to the idea. So let's say like you're in a position though where there is nobody ahead of you charging more than you, but you're gotten to a point where your schedule is very busy, right? Let's say 89% occupancy rate, if you will, and you've been charging what you've been charging for a year, 2 years, maybe more, right? How do you actually approach that conversation with the client though?
Oh, with the client?
Yeah.
Okay, that's different.
Yes.
I don't think I do super great at this, but I don't have a bad retention over any time I've bumped prices. My retention's been really good. So like one thing that I do is, and I was telling a trainer to do this the other day, is I give them a timeline. That's like the first thing I do is like, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm going to hit, you know, this certain benchmark at this point. Or I might even, be candid with them and tell them like, hey, my schedule is getting too full. Like I don't have time. But what I'll do is I'll tell them like, hey, in May of this year, my price point's going to change. And you could relate that to any specific reason. I think continued education is probably the best way, where you're like, you know, I'm picking up a new certification, or I've hit, you know, 10,000 hours of training, whatever it may be. But in May, my price point's going to change. So on April 30th is your last chance at this price point if you want to buy more sessions. So like if you want to do, you know, you don't normally do 24 sessions. If you want to do like 48 or 100, you can do 100 at my old price point on April 30th. After that, my price point's going to change. I think establishing that timeline helps a lot. It shows your clients that you care a little bit or a lot, and that like you're hoping to help them as much as possible without stepping on your own toes. Truthfully, I think if you're providing an awesome service though, like you're not going to get a bunch of pushback for this. A lot of my clients now even are telling me that I'm undercharging, which is in my head doesn't make sense, but
right.
You know, it's one of those things where like if you're truly focused on purely service, the price point conversation is super easy.
For sure. And your prices increased at least $50 a session in the last 3 years?
Yeah. My price point seems like every 6 months my price point's going up. Yeah. So, and again, I don't think I've had a single person drop off over a price point change.
No.
I don't think I've had one. I've not had anybody like decide, hey, I'm not training anymore because your prices went up, which is crazy because I've trained so many people.
Yeah. It's typically a fear that exists in our own mind that does not exist.
It's not real. Yeah.
Yeah. Because over the scheme of, or over a month, let's say, right, the price is not really that substantial. Even if it goes up something, like
I mean, I went from
40,
85 to 100, which was a $15 bump. That was the biggest bump I ever did in
at
like one time.
Yep.
And it was funny. The next like 8 people I talked to and I pitched 100, they signed up. I remember, I think I was 7 for 7 or 8 for 8 on the new price point. And I was like, that's insane. I was like, this doesn't make sense.
You were trying to get them to go with somebody else, and they kept saying yes.
But the price point creates so much conviction too, where like if they see that, I mean, and they're like thinking about signing up, and then they're like, holy, $100, this guy must be the shit. I'm signing up right now. Like I'm not working with a $75 guy. I want the expensive. You know, you see that a lot. Yeah. But it's cool because those people are the same people that take this so much more serious, and they end up getting such a higher return on investment than some of those lower price point options.
Yeah, and they can't afford to ever let you go and stop paying for it because they may never get their time slot back. And that's something that I've always found is like, no, I don't care what you cost. I know that it's going to be more, but I can't afford not to be in your schedule. So I'm going to continue to pay the higher premium, if you will, in order to stay. So yeah, that's something. If you continuously put more value into the service that you put out, and again, not all of that is just the exercise science of it all, but the rapport, the professional business acumen, the communication, all of those items, the scarcity, the perceived value, the more of that you put in, the higher that people are going to want to pay for your service and then not leave.
Yeah. And so like, if you're a new trainer and you're listening to what we just talked about, this was a conversation that like I heard in our building when I first started, because we had tenured trainers that had been there a long time, and they were talking about these same topics. And I was like mind blown, because I was like, I don't even have clients yet. And these guys are talking about bumping up to $100 a set. I mean, what? So if you're listening to that, I think it can either be like an insecurity thing where it's like, oh, that's just an anomaly and like, I'm never going to get there. Or it's a fantastic like eye opener for you where you realize like, oh, if they were worried about that, like it must be really easy for me to get clients. Because a lot of people are worried about like just getting clients in the first place. And in all actuality, it's really not that hard because people need our service. And so if you're listening to that part about like, okay, well, this is what I need to do at a veteran, and you're like, well, I don't even have a client yet. It's a great reminder that like getting clients is not that difficult. This industry is for you if you decided that you want to get into it. All you have to do is, do the little bit of groundwork and go put the effort in on those contacts.
Yeah. What was the quote that you had from Alex Hormozi?
Alex Hormozi. Let me pull it back up.
Essentially, when you put in enough volume of work that you give yourself undeniable proof.
Yeah.
You are who you say you are. But
outworking your self-doubt, I think, is like one of the strongest lines I've ever heard.
Yeah. Not even just like reinforcing your own identity that you're actually in this industry to help people, but when you put in so much work that it leaves no doubt in the outcome, because just overwhelming volume, I mean, you're going to end up moving the needle in this industry. It's not something that requires a certain level of intelligence. It's obviously no, it's not something that requires a certain level of intelligence or some like academic benchmark, or you have to pay like a certain price in order to get into the industry. None of that hurdle exists. The only real hurdle is the ones that we can self-impose from just not putting in the work requirement, not paying what success ultimately requires.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the biggest limiter to your success is purely yourself, which is a blessing and a curse because you don't see that in other fields. Not always.
No.
In our field, we're very lucky that it's purely up to us. I mean, that's one of the things that I love the most about this career is that like, it's completely up to me what I get out of it. It's one of the things that attracted me to the gym, right? I was playing baseball and I was like, I'm never going to throw 95. I just wasn't born to throw 95 miles per hour. It wasn't going to happen. So I knew I couldn't play pro baseball. When I started working out, I realized that like this doesn't require genetics. It doesn't require talent. It's purely whatever effort I get in is my exact outcome. And our industry works the exact same way. Okay. So if you like that responsibility, I definitely think this is an industry for you where you can succeed at a massive amount if you purely just take more responsibility in on yourself.
For sure. Those rationalizations are going to be tempting along the way where it's for some external reason as to why an individual can't be successful. Prepare yourself for that ahead of time. Prepare for it on every step of the way, because I mean, in any kind of like entrepreneurial venture, like we're gonna wanna to serve our ego, victimize ourselves from time to time. I can't succeed because there's not enough new members joining the club, or I can't succeed because my boss is bad. Right?
I can't succeed because the veteran trainers have too many of the clients, and so there's not enough clients for our new trainers.
Yeah, none of those actually serve you. So, make sure that you're prepared for those ahead of time, taking ownership. So I hope this podcast and this discussion today was valuable to you. To give you kind of some like benchmarks along the way of where your focus should be and what your actions should look like in order to progress through your career and move towards your goals, and hopefully delivering impact, earning a great living, and earning great income for yourselves. And we look forward to getting back with you guys next week for another podcast.
Yeah. On our next podcast, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of like a Q&A format. So we're going to send this podcast out to the people around us, and we're going to ask them for some direct questions about what it is that we're talking about. I guess the general timeline of building a training career or business. And so if you guys have any other specific questions that you guys want us to touch on that next one, great time to leave it down in the comment section, or you can message us privately. But yeah, we want to hit some quick hitting questions on this next one. Thank you guys. See you next time.
Thanks, guys.